Hello, everyone. My name is Annissa George. Thanks for tuning in. This discussion is part of my Listen and Learn series, where I join residents from different backgrounds to bring awareness about their work. I believe the best way to find solutions to our most pressing issues is by making sure everyone has a seat at the table, at least in this case, the virtual table. Today's conversation will focus on the work to support our older residents with affordable housing with Two Life Communities, a housing facility that was founded in 1965 to address the housing dislocation and chronic loneliness that were threatening to devastate the final chapter in the lives of low-income Jews in Boston. I'm so proud to be joined by Amy Sneckman, and the current CEO, and Emily Levine, their Chief of Staff. So Emily, Amy, welcome. For those of you, for those that may be tuned in that don't know about Two Life, would you please share a little bit about the work that you're doing?
Sure, and thank you so much for including us in this important conversation. So Two Life's mission is that every older adult have the opportunity to live a full life of connection and purpose in a dynamic, supportive environment. And we do that with a laser sharp focus on affordability, meaning we only go where the market fails. And the market is failing a lot of our older adults. The way that housing prices are in Boston, if you're on Social Security, and even if you have a slight pension, you can't, even if you pay 100% of your income, you can't have decent, supportive housing that engages you in community life the way older adults wish to age. And so we provide, right now we have about 800 apartments in Boston. We're about to break ground on another 142 in a partnership with the Boston Housing Authority. And all of our housing sites, people are paying 30% of their income in rent. So even though the median annual income is just under $10,000 a year for each household, in fact, because once they come into us, we make sure they're on SNAP and Medicaid and the state's long-term services. In fact, even at extremely low incomes, people can have a vibrant and meaningful life. And you know what that means? It means they're volunteering elsewhere. We have people tutoring in the schools, mentoring young people. You know, there's an old, what we call a midrash, which is a little commentary. And it says that Adam and Eve went astray in the Garden of Eden because they didn't have any elders to guide them. Our elders are providing that role for our young people. And we're really proud because once you remove the barriers to that kind of mentoring and volunteering, which is not being able to afford your housing, not having enough food, etc. In fact, our folks are generous and kind, as are the older adults in our society. So we just unleash that power by taking care of the basics.
I really love that. And I imagine that when you have a cultural and ethnic community that's together and they share, the Jewish values, how important that is for them to find that community together. Can you speak a little bit about the benefits of that?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. And what I should say is we are a Jewish organization and we certainly do have strong cultural values. And we have a very, very diverse community. We have 80-something% of our folks are immigrants from former Soviet Union countries, China, Vietnam, and other places, because Brighton is a very vibrant immigrant community, and we reflect our neighborhood and embrace the cultural differences in our neighborhood. That's why we have staff in every resident-facing department that speak all the languages, people's native languages, so that if you have a problem with your sink, and you can't think about the English word, it doesn't matter because we've got somebody in our maintenance department that speaks Russian and Ukrainian and
Spanish and Korean and
we have, I think, 7 or 9 languages.
Translate everything into 7.
Yeah. So that, and if you're having a problem, you're worried about your daughter who just moved away to California and you're scared about what that means for you, you can have a private and very important conversation in your native language. And that's a really important. So we overlay this treasuring of diversity with a belief in community life. And we have 2 pieces of that, and I'll try and do that quickly. One piece is that we have at least one, what we call a resident service coordinator for every 100 residents. And their job is, number one, make sure every person has what they need. Make sure no one's going hungry because food stamps or other supplemental food is available. Make sure all the basics, and that's critical. The other thing is we have a whole range of program staff so that we have programs ranging from art, music, culture, lifelong learning, book groups, fitness and wellness, health education, intergenerational programs, so that everyone finds their way into community. You know, for you, a counselor, you might be really interested in the concerts or the book clubs, but Emily here, she might be much more interested in the fitness and wellness or the intergenerational programs. So you have to make sure that you have a big enough array that everyone can find their way into community. And that
I really love that, because I think that there's an assumption that older adults, those that are retired in sort of their senior years, are more interested in just sort of sitting alone reading a book. And, you know, we make these assumptions about what retirement, what, you know, after years of work should look like. And you've created a whole array of opportunities for different types of engagement.
Absolutely. And, you know, the latest study from Stanford University out in California says that people who, older adults, it was a study of elders, wake up with a sense of purpose to their day are 2.4 times less likely to develop any kind of cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's, any kind of dementia, but even mild cognitive impairment. And I think when I know you're coming next week, we can't wait to show that off for you. And although you've been there before, I will never, ever, ever, ever forget that at the beginning of COVID, and we couldn't get PPE. I don't know if people remember that, but it wasn't there. And you sewed masks and personally brought them over to us. That was really, believe me, that's like right there in my mind. I'm never forgetting that. But when you come to our community, you see that kind of vibrancy and generosity of spirit for each other, supporting each other, because people are at core kind and wonderful, and they love that they can be part of a community. And
how has COVID impacted your residents and those that you work with every day in Two Life?
Excellent question. And COVID was hard on everyone. It was frightening. And I do believe that we learned a lot from COVID. The most important thing we learned is that where you live really determines how and even if you live. You know, during the entire COVID pandemic, which still goes on today, we lost fewer than 1% of our residents, which, considering the age and how much at high risk they were. And in fact, like we know in Massachusetts, 20% of nursing home and assisted living residents died. And that didn't happen. And it didn't happen for us, partly because we were so dedicated to making sure that people had what they need. We invited our residents to be community heroes. And if they signed a pledge about helping keep all of our communities safe, we had an artist design a beautiful placard for their door, and a lot of our residents became community heroes. So it wasn't something just happening to them. The other things that we did that I think really mattered were, if you remember, particularly the first 3-4 months, we were getting bombarded with information that was confusing and contradictory and scary. And so we hired our own staff epidemiologist so that we could translate the information and send out constant notices about, well, this is what this means, and this is what this means. And I think that created a sense of safety. The other thing is, right at the beginning, within the first 2 weeks, we created a massive spreadsheet where we called every single resident to find out what they needed. And some people needed a lot of things. We provided free meals, free groceries, did people's laundry, anything people needed. Some people wanted just the daily touch base. Some people wanted a monthly touch base. And so we were able to provide those needs, make sure no one was disconnected. I mean, we did ask people to stay in their apartments. So that was just an important safety. And we had, by the end of the second week, we had fitness classes online that you could join. We had lifelong learning lectures online. We created our own digital lending library because a lot of our residents don't have computers. But then we created our own TV station because everyone everyone has a TV and everyone knows how to use a TV. We also had a group of people doing one-on-one phone consultations about, yes, turn the button on. Yeah, that's how it works, because we didn't want anyone to be left out, regardless of their level of digital sophistication.
No, I love that.
What else do we do?
I think engagement was big, and we certainly provided PPE. We started to bring in capacity to do our own in-house testing, which was, I think we learned a lot about what capacity we had that doesn't necessarily reflect that of other organizations. And we learned a lot about kind of equity in that way too, because Amy worked so hard to build up some area where we could pull some funds to be able to do some of this work. It wasn't government supported. And so I think we were making really conscious efforts to share resources as much as possible with the community. We had a really good connection with Madison Park and with the team there around fitness and wellness classes. We shared with the other CDCs in the state. Here's all of the programming we have that we've developed on demand, and we really want it to be accessible to you. But it don't let it get twisted. It was really hard, and it was hard. We equipped our staff to call residents in different languages, from our accounting office, from every level and layer of the organization, to just be a part of the communication, because it was also hard on staff. And so it was tough. And I think our residents now rejoice in ways that are really special when you see them in the halls, and we're starting to acclimate again to what does it feel like to be together, and how do we do that safely. And it's been a lot, but I will say, to see how the community aspect of being together while also being doors apart played out was really
I mean, that just reminded me, one of the things we did is we had like hallway trivia contests where everyone would come to their door and sit in their door, because our doors are at least 8 feet apart from each other. So people would sit in their doors, and we'd call out, how many times did the Boston Red Sox win the World Series? And, and then we had prizes if you got answers. And
that's awesome.
Hallway games. And of course, in the nice weather, we did walking clubs and, all sorts of outdoor things. We also led a coalition of 80 affordable housing managers to advocate, and successfully advocate, to get vaccines into affordable senior housing in phase 1 instead of much later when they were scheduled. And so that allowed all of us to open up earlier.
So I want to ask about the name To Life. But really what it sounds like to me is you've created opportunities through COVID, but also just in regular times, you've created what I think is new life and sort of new experiences and new engagements. But can you tell me a little bit about the name To Life?
Sure. And thank you. We picked this name about 3-4 years ago. And so it represents, first of all, To Life, it translates into Hebrew as L'chaim, which is the most famous toast of to life, we remember from Fiddler.
Oh, To Life.
Right.
To life. Now I get it.
And we believe, you mentioned earlier, and I thought that was such a very brilliant insight you had, that people mistakenly believe seniors just want to kind of sit back and sit in a rocking chair and read a book. And in fact, particularly as you look at my generation, the baby boomers, we've spent a life working to change the world, to make the world a better place. And we feel like we've accumulated a lot of experiences and knowledge. And now we want to elevate the way we can contribute. And so we're about To Life, to enhancing everyone's life. We believe everyone comes to us with experiences, wisdom, curiosities, learnings, disappointments, and excitements. And our job is to help them weave together every single piece of that into their next phase of life, which should be their best phase of life. And so we honor that, and we celebrate their lives, and we believe everyone's life is made better by sharing it with others. So it's To Life communities. It's that emphasis on everyone's better in concert with everyone else.
I absolutely love that, and appreciate the diversity of your residents and those that live in your communities. Can you talk a little bit about the role of Jewish faith and customs in those efforts? And I think a little bit of that is in the name and this to life, but how, just wonderful it is to celebrate those customs within a diverse community.
Yeah, I love that question. So our founding as a Jewish organization means there's certain key things. Number one is the most important commandment, and we share it across faith, but is honor thy mother and father. And we see that as a collective enterprise. So anyone who's an elder deserves our respect and deserves to be honored and cared for. A second piece that actually speaks to the diversity is, I used to think in Judaism, the commandment was welcome thy neighbor. And then recently I was rereading, and it actually says, love thy neighbor. And I'm sorry. And welcome the stranger is what I thought it said. But now it actually says, love the stranger as you were once strangers in Egypt. And so opening our doors, hearts, and minds every single time we open our doors is really an important part of where we are. And then the third piece of our values is tikkun olam, which means repair of the world. And the inequities in our society are heartbreaking. The idea that someone who spent their life raising a family, or maybe they didn't have a family, but they contributed to a career, they contributed to building the infrastructure of our society, and that once they're no longer working, we throw them out. We don't care about what they can still contribute. That's just a moral bankruptcy of our society. And it's really, American society really is an ageist society. And so we have to fight that. We have to fight that tooth and nail. And we bring all of that. And so that plays out in the way we honor people, welcome people, and celebrate cultural. So for example, we have every year, at every place, we have a Rosh Hashanah dinner, we have a Passover Seder that's done in 5 languages. It's long, but it's translated. We've made our own Haggadah, which is in Chinese, Russian, Hebrew, and English. We also, though, we celebrate Russian Victory Day. We celebrate Chinese New Year. We celebrate August Moon Festival. We celebrate every holiday. We invite all of our residents to share with us what their holidays are, and then we share all of those holidays with each other. And so at our Passover Seder, it makes me so proud that, as we say, like a responsive reading, some people are responding in Chinese, in Mandarin, and Cantonese, and Taiwanese. Other people are responding in Russian and Ukrainian, and other in Hebrew and English, and it's a loud din, but it's a wonderful din because people have learned. And what we do at Passover, for example, is we ask people to share their own personal Exodus story. Some of the stories from China, some of the stories from Russia are not the Exodus story in the Bible, but they're very real and very important Exodus stories. And, I've learned a lot about Russian Victory Day, Japanese Girls' Day. I mean, there's all these wonderful holidays that now our celebrations have been enhanced by everyone else's celebrations, and the commonalities are fascinating. I'll never forget one year I was at the August Moon Festival, and I was sort of new, so I hadn't yet learned. And I asked some of our residents, can you explain to me what we're celebrating? Because I noticed there were gourds on the table and vegetables. And they said, well, this is our harvest festival. And we go outdoors and we celebrate the harvest, and we look up at the stars and we honor our ancestors. And I gasped, because if you had asked me to explain the holiday of Sukkot, those are the exact words I would have used. And I said, wow, you celebrate Sukkot, or August Moon Festival is Sukkot. And the more we have those conversations, the more we realize how much we share. And so we use our Jewish identity as an entree into learning and celebrating other people's identities. And it drives us to be repairing the world at every turn.
I absolutely love that. And I think what you've described and what you've created truly is community. When we think about what, the definition of community, that's what it is right there. And being able to share those celebrations, I think just really is wonderful. And I am Just over the moon to hear about it, and can't wait to participate in some of those celebrations as we reopen. So what you do at Two Life is so important. Can you talk a little bit about how you work to build these communities, and both sort of in an idea and concept and feeling, but also literally? How do you work to build housing for both low income and middle income residents? And how do we get to this next phase, and what are those next steps?
Thank you for asking that. It's become a lot more complicated and difficult. And I'm just going to take you back for one moment to about 30 years ago, and more, when I got into this business, but even as recently as 1990s. Our federal government had a program called 202, which is not a very good name, but it was Section 202 of the housing law. And it said seniors deserve housing that's supportive. So you got a grant from the federal government to build capital, to build the whole thing. And then you got a guarantee of operating subsidy for 30 years. That meant that every one of your residents would always pay only 30% of their income. And it allowed you to serve from 0 to 80% of area median. It was a brilliant program. It was extraordinarily efficient and effective. So we stopped it with the first sequestration. It went out the window, and we've replaced it with having to piece together a whole array of little pieces. So, for example, when we built Weinberg House, which is in Brighton, it has 61 apartments. We had over 750 people apply to be there, and the waiting list is now 7-8 years long. It makes me cry. We had to put together 14 separate sources of financing.
Wow.
A little bit from here, a little bit. The city was magnificent and kicked in from 3 different pools of city funds. The state kicked in from 5 different pools of state funds. Federal had 3 different kinds of funds. And we raised considerable philanthropy to fill in the gap, because we believe there should be extensive community spaces that don't really fit into these formulas. And it's just much more complicated and much more difficult. And it makes it harder to operate too, because now we're responding to 14 different contracts for the regulations. And so it makes it more difficult. And it works. And we've figured out how to make this work. The other challenge with these new sources of financing, as I mentioned before, you could serve 0 to 80% of area median. That may sound high, but for a senior, 70% area median means you can't afford housing in the Boston market. Let's say now we're down to the low-income housing tax credit program basically allows you to serve between 45 and 60% of area median. It's a very narrow window. So then you beg, steal, borrow vouchers. And so that part, and some of them are limited to 30% and 50%. So it's a whole complicated array. Nonetheless, the city has a wonderful department. D&D does a phenomenal job of getting money out the door and working in partnership with organizations like ours. The state is fabulous. Massachusetts is probably the best state in the country in terms of putting their own money into affordable housing. And the feds have been really delinquent. Now, the new laws that the infrastructure law that President Biden is proposing would do something for that. And we're hoping the city can be our ally in really restoring the 202 program, because that would do a couple of things. One, there'd be more senior housing. 2, it takes senior housing out of the competition for state and local funds, because the federal government, and I hate the fact that we have to compete for family housing, which is also important.
Right.
I would never say we're more important, but the 202 would actually remove us from that competition. And the other thing it would do is, if you think about the housing system as a system, there are a lot of seniors in Boston who are trapped in their house. We know of some, they call us, they have a triple decker and they're terrified. They don't want tenants anymore. It's too scary. So they're trapped in this house. They can't use the value of their house to live a better life, because there's no place for them to move where there's any kind of support and community. And so if we could help find places for those folks who desperately want a new place, then that housing can be recycled for young families, because the lack of opportunity is so.
I mean, there's a real connection. There's a real connection between, you know, finding opportunities for our older Bostonians to age in place and, you know, putting housing back on the market for young families and growing families. So I'm just taking a couple of notes here. That 202 program is a state program or a federal program?
Federal. Good.
So, you know, that's something certainly that we can advocate for, to look, you know, to see how. That's great. I appreciate that. I've made some notes here. What are
and
some?
Senator Warren has been on that one. Senator Warren is supporting that as well. Go ahead.
Right. No. So I was just going to say, what are some of the other barriers for our older Bostonians to accessing housing?
So let me talk a little bit about the middle income, because right now our portfolio is exclusively focused on mostly extremely low income.
Yeah.
I mentioned our median household annual income in Boston is under $10,000 a year. So that's extremely low. And that's great. So one of the things we've learned as a society is that aging in place is a very destructive concept. It forces people to stay lonely and sad, and they die on average 5 years earlier than if they lived in community. They get dementia twice the rate as people who are living in community, and 32% more heart attacks and strokes. So it's not a good thing, even though we pretend it is. So aging in community is the ideal. Now, there's not enough of it, but we know how to do it for low income folks. And if you look at the market, we definitely know how to do it for very wealthy people. There's there are many, many great options for the people at the very upper end of the income. Yeah. For that vast middle, there's nothing. And there's nothing because an organization can't do it and even break even, right? Because if you think about it, if you want to think about people's entire lifespan, 70% of the people are going to need some kind of home care support, some kind of support over the course of their lives. And that's what makes people broke, and they end up prematurely in nursing homes. If you think about what they need for their whole life and you want to serve the middle, you can't charge enough money to have all the to pay for all the services and programs they're going to need. You can't. And yet you can't get any government money. There's not a single program in the government. So it's kind of like this catch-22. You can't charge enough money to do what you need to do, but you can't get money or philanthropy. So we banged our head against the wall for about 4 years, and we came up with a new program called Opus. And it's based on 3 ways to get through this barrier. Number 1, we're expecting everyone who comes to live with us to volunteer their time in a meaningful enough way that we reduce staff and overhead costs. Mm-hmm. And that's testing very well in the market. 2, we're locating it in proximity of other things. So we're not trying to create an enclave where you'll never leave. You go out, you go to dinner, you go to the theater, you'll do things. We don't need to recreate everything here. So that saves us some money. And the 3rd is we're negotiating these partnerships that, because of density, let me give you an example. You can afford things better. So let me give you an example, because this was very personal. When my mother began to need some help, she needed a half an hour in the morning and a half an hour at night. And that's pretty typical. But guess what? In our society, the only way you can purchase that half an hour is in a 4-hour block. So I was purchasing 8 hours of care when she needed a total of 1. And that's about $30 an hour. So guess what happened to her savings? Plummeted. So that by the time she needed more care, we didn't have any more money left. Now, she was lucky. I was willing to pay for it, but not everybody has that option. So we're having care on campus, and you can purchase exactly what you need, because we're going to share the overhead amongst everyone together. So I would have only purchased 1 hour a day for about 6 months. Well, think about how much money that would have saved. So between those 3 things, which is the volunteerism, the proximity to other things, and the shared overhead for services that make it more affordable, we're going to serve really that middle income group that's never been served before. Now, I wish I could tell you our first one's going to be in Boston, but we haven't yet found the right site. Our dream is to be in Boston. Our first one, we're in the middle of permitting now in Newton. But once we have it up and running and we prove the concept, and we're going to invest some of our own quasi endowment in it because we want to prove that this can work. And people are a little skeptical because everybody's going to volunteer. How will that work? Well, it will work because people love to volunteer and people love to help. So we're working on that concept, and it will be the first in the nation. And as I said, if we can prove it, we're going to want to replicate it and work with you to find the right site in Boston.
I love it. And I do love the idea, especially around the volunteerism, how important that is. And, again, back to the original, point, our older residents don't want to just sit in the rocking chair and read or watch TV. They want to be engaged in their lives, and they have a lot to share. How can people get involved if they're looking to get involved, whether to support your work financially or if they've got services or an opportunity to volunteer? What can they do? How can they do it?
I think there's a lot of opportunities. Certainly in Boston, we're looking, as we grow out in JJ Carroll, we're looking to do more, and we're building a lot of community-facing space in front of our Weinberg and JJ Carroll space. So just come by. I think the more that we can do that safely, the better. I would definitely direct you to our website to just see what opportunities we have. We have a lot of volunteering that goes on, people that are coming on site doing gardening, doing a range of things. We're working with community partners like DIMIC to do different health and fitness awareness work with our seniors and with our staff. Definitely any ways in which you want to support us financially. We have events coming up that are exciting. Definitely check out our social media. If you're interested in Opus and hearing more about the concept, we do have a number of really exciting engagement opportunities to hear from leaders in the field who talk about the meaning of aging and purpose. And I think those are really exciting ways to find your way into understanding the model better. So that's the twolifetogether.org. That's the website there, but you can find it all from our website, and
which is twolifecommunities.org.
Yeah,
love it. Make sure that we share it on our social media.
Great.
That's
great.
great.
I mean, I think we're definitely upping our civic engagement game with our residents. They have so many good stories. We're excited to have you here next week. But we'll get a better answer for you soon, because I think we're going to think about other ways to get people engaged. We're just excited about growth and that the opportunity to be doing more and sharing the meaning of what it is to age in community.
Can I just mention the JJ Carroll, because I only vaguely mentioned. So the right adjacent to our Brighton campus and is the old JJ Carroll, which is an obsolete old senior public housing development, and the Boston Housing Authority, be very forward-thinking, partnered with us, and we are about to demolish it. It was 3-story walk-ups, and people were trapped in their apartment because there was no elevator. And so we're going to build 142 new units where there were 64, and we're creating a PACE center on the ground floor. PACE stands for Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly, and it's a very comprehensive health and wellness, and we're opening it to the whole community. So it will be right on Chestnut Hill Avenue with facing, and we invite other people to come in, and there'll be an interior bridge that connects it to our auditorium and our gym. And we invite people to take advantage of what we offer, not just for our residents, but to the area seniors. And I think that will be a change. And in fact, one of the things we're doing is building an intergenerational playground in front of the building. And we hope children and grandchildren and grandparents will take advantage of walking through our site and saying, oh, this looks like fun, and joining right in.
I absolutely love that. And, we generally on these Zooms, these Facebook Live things that we do, we generally ask the question, what's sort of that one wish? What's the thing that we need to do next? If you had a magic wand, and I'm going to answer the question for you. It's the Opus program and finding you some space in Boston to do it. So I'm excited about that. Amy, Emily, I'm so grateful that you spent this time with me talking about your programs. We'll certainly share all the links and everything about To Life, because what you're doing is really, really wonderful. And To Life, I adore your work and can't wait to see you in person next week.
Yeah.
Emily, Amy, thank you.
Thank you so much.